outsider overlay of domination, 50,000 years ago. As Eve listened, the stranger acted as if he were the master of the garden. How absurd, she thought. She looked over at Adam. He seemed as if he were in a trance. What was happening? She held tightly to Adam's hand, but there was no reassuring response. Eve heard snatches of words. You cannot taste the fruit of that tree. Not yours to experience. You cannot know what is good or evil. Only gods can know that there is good and evil. What did he mean? She had tasted. Of course, she could tell the differences. She had felt the joy, the excitement of some forms, and the constrictions and shutting down by the taste of others. Even now, in this energy, she was having a hard time staying focused. What was that, he said? Have to leave? Earn sustenance through sweat and hard work? No longer create effortlessly? Eve felt a bit weak, but Adam was unresponsive, frozen in place. She reached out to hold on to him. Whatever they must face, they would do it together. She thought that she was strong, but now she felt not strong enough yet for this energy. She would stay close to Adam, continue to learn from her teacher, and when she was ready, she would do what was needed. The words, cannot know, creations through pain, echoed in her mind as she and Adam moved away from their beautiful home. Chapter 14, Making Changes. Jerry thought about the last month. Her pain had brought Rory into her life. His presence and support gave her a sense of safety that had allowed her to move forward. She had decided to lock the door on people, and yet Rory had understood her sensitivity and had helped her reframe its value and to be open to skills to cope with what she sensed. At times, she seemed to know what she needed before she did. Through his encouragement, she was learning to pay more attention to her feelings and her thoughts. She felt his love for her. With him, she had felt safe enough to share some of her ideas, her dreams, and her fears. It was as if she was awaking from a long sleep, but a sleep in which she had walked, talked, and eaten, but was not present. She still had memories, pains, anger with which to deal. Those were definitely legal matters ahead, but she was no longer in her cave alone. For Rory, his meeting and time spent with Jerry were challenging him in new and many ways. Her encounter with Dean in the hospital had cracked open a wound she had seemingly sealed long ago. He did not understand why the memory of that event was there for him also. However, Rory was so thankful he had been there and marveled at how the timing had just happened. Jerry was not back on top by any means, but she was out of the hospital with support to rebuild. Rory marveled that she had come into his life and surprised at his gratitude for having been there for her. Rory had seen that the normal healing course of such a traumatic experience is what it could be. He knew it could be some time before she felt stable and safe. But then again, he had listened and watched Pam very carefully. The scars, cycles, and patterns you would expect from traumatic experiences such as Pam's were not there. He knew that somehow Pam had managed deep healing. Her thoughts and behaviors were what some clients were beginning to reach only after many years of committed work. He wondered if Pam's insight could help Jerry heal more deeply and quickly. He approached Pam that evening. Pam, what effect has this information had on your life? Rory began. I'm wondering about observable, concrete changes for the better. Pam leaned back in his office chair and thought for a minute. Well, at first, the information allowed me to look at myself, my life, and my past with less judgmental eyes. And that was helpful because with different eyes, some of my anger dissipated. Pam was silent again before she continued. My life began to have a purpose. I was no longer just struggling to get through a day or to survive another night. Asking questions of shadow was almost like being in school. I looked forward to the stimulation I felt with the new ideas. As I felt less discouraged and was less weighted down with anger, I felt hope again, and I began to believe that my life could change. But you're right in asking about concrete changes. That's what I value too. I wanted to move out of this cycle of poverty, non-identity, and non-value. Thanks to my new understanding of the realm of the unseen, I knew I had a lot of spiritual help. And what I eventually asked Shadow was, how can I change my life, my physical situations? Now, I had experienced that sense of light and what I call love. That gave me a marker which made me more aware of the despondency I had often felt. I decided I no longer wanted to live in that darkness. My choice was to know the way to a life of joy and peace. Am I anywhere close to beginning to answer your question? Yes, I was working out some ideas in relation to what I, as a counselor, would expect to see in similar situations, was Rory's comment. Pam continued. At first, I was constantly aware of the crisis my life had become. However, every time I felt the heaviness, which was almost all of the time for a while, I would turn to Shadow and I would learn more and apply the ideas. With sensitivity to the unwanted feelings or situations, I would then make specific requests that allowed those in spirit to eliminate the cause. It was as if I were being freed from thousands and thousands of single strands of rope that I or myself had put around me. Eventually, the peace was there about 50% of the time. And then Shadow and the spiritual healers started to teach me about masks and wounded inner parts. Increasingly, I felt more powerful, able to understand the message in the pain and release the seed imprint. I learned that pain pointed to a problem imprint. It was a message giver. I began to appreciate the process because I had a new way to understand quickly. The pain rarely escalated and, in fact, lessened. In the last year and a half, my situation on the streets changed dramatically. With the answers from Shadow and using this planet's law of free agency, I took the reins of my runaway life back into my hands. Eventually, I found myself here. I know that being led to the center and meeting are all moving me toward a more positive life changes. Like the previous steps, this came just when I most needed another one. Pam sat back and sighed with relief at the telling. You said you had not shared this information with anyone. Is that right? That's right. I have used myself as the guinea pig. However, using what I learned, I would sometimes extend what I called spiritual healing to others. I don't really understand what you mean by that, Rory probed. Well, I discovered that Shadow was not the only friend I had in the unseen worlds. I soon had a group of healers who worked with me to dissolve my dense energies and anchor changes in my thought patterns. When I was in the shelters or food lines, the frustration, the anger, and hopelessness were all around me. The energy pressed in. I was very uncomfortable. Can you imagine the emotional situation? Yes, I can imagine. responded Rory. Well, I was becoming more and more sensitive to the heaviness of others' vibrations and was no longer numb as I had been. I asked Shadow and my teachers how I could feel more peaceful in those situations and also be helpful to those around me. Well, I was told I could ask that the energy fields of others be cleared of the negative vibrations that surrounded them. My guides reminded me that each has unseen guides who are moving with him or her through life. Those caught up in their own imbalanced, negative situations were often overwhelmed and unaware of the presence of that help. The guides of others would hear my request for transforming the heaviness. Then, because someone in a physical body had asked me, those unseen teams could do what was needed for that person, working at a soul level. So based on the work that had been necessary for me, I made requests for those in the lines, at the shelters, or in the streets. The energy all around all of us became less heavy. So I called it a healing by spirit, or spiritual healing. Oh, I see, Rory said. Well, he paused to decide what he would say. Jerry was on his mind. She wasn't a client, and yet what should he say? He decided he would stay vague and yet indicate what intrigued him with Pam. The reason I'm asking these questions is that I'm choosing to explore ideas beyond those in my professional world. Also, I have a friend who has been hit a rather hard blow. I'd like to see her walk away from it more comfortably and quickly than is normally the case. Pam closed her eyes. A shock wave rushed through her heart, and the hair on her arm stood on end. She was raped, wasn't she? Yes, Rory remarked. How did you know? I just know. I am here because she needs me. I don't know what that means, but that is what I hear inside. That evening, after his talk with Pam, Rory decided to try something she had shared with him, the power of request to the unseen world of healers. He would turn his desire that Pam help Jerry over to spirit, those higher vibrational beings of which Pam spoke. If there were truth in her words, and if beings that he could not see thought Jerry could benefit, they could bring Pam and Jerry together. Such is the laboratory of life. Try on a concept, make a choice, and then see the consequences. He felt this move fit within his criteria. There was no harm possible in this idea. He sat down on his bed and took off his shoes. What was it that Pam had said about free agency on this planet? We have to ask to get their help. What would be his request, he asked. He started with his desires and wrote them down. I would like to be a participant in helping others heal more profoundly and quickly. I would like to be a participant in whatever is best for Jerry's quick and gentle healing. I would like to heal myself more deeply. Then he stopped to form his thoughts into a request. I ask that my requests be heard and accomplished. I ask to be shown what I can do. If it is best for Jerry to work with Pam, I declare they are brought together. Then Rory chuckled. It sounded very much like prayers. He thought of Pam's guide, Shadow, and wondered who he would trust as a consistent spiritual support. His experience with spiritual matters had been growing up in a Christian church, and he felt comfortable with the master teacher, Jesus Christ. He thought of the values that he attributed to the Master Jesus. Holding that thought, Rory spoke. The qualities of my spiritual support team are love, wisdom, commitment, honesty, and nobility. They work with my requests under the directions of the Master Jesus and with integrity to his qualities. I leave these requests in their hands. Did you do it right? Well, he'd watch for the consequences. Blessings.